Welcome back to the Trackstar Podcast, a conversation about music and culture centered around a playlist I've specifically created for our guests. This week, a conversation with Tom Freston, one of the founding members of MTV, who went on to become the CEO of MTV Networks for many, many years.
The only way we really could get something done was to kind of ask the artists themselves. You just say his name, and people would flock to the network and turn it on to watch him.
We'll learn about the rise of MTV from a tiny 5-person company.
Announcing the latest achievement in home entertainment.
We were about to go out of business. This was like a Hail Mary pass.
To one of the most important and massive music brands on the planet.
Total Request Live.
Yo, MTV Raps.
MTV Video Music Awards, live from New York.
I had no idea that it would turn out to be as big as it did.
Without further ado, roll the intro.
Testing, 1, 2, 3.
Check, check.
You ready?
I'm ready.
Trackstar, let's go.
I wish the world could be in these headphones right now.
I'm on the show. How fun.
We're off to a very hot start here. You ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, before we start with the music, just introduce yourself over here.
I'm Tom Freston. I've had a whole range of menial jobs, but most of my career has been in the media business.
Thanks for coming to the studio.
Great to be here.
This is, I think, the first podcast episode recorded in here. This is like very exciting for us.
Well, it's exciting to be here. There's all this construction halting temporarily while we do this podcast.
Yeah, exactly. They just left. As you came in, you traded places in the elevator. You've had an amazing career, a lot of it having to do with music. I want to play you some songs, get your perspective on those songs, and see if a story comes out of it. So I'll play something for you. This is for you. And all you got to do is tell me, just tell me about the song.
I heard you on the wireless back in 52.
Buggles. Video Kill the Radio Star.
Okay. What does this song mean to you?
Well, it was the first video we played on MTV.
They took the credit for your second symphony, rewritten by machine on new technology.
It was a prophecy that still hasn't come true.
Yeah.
The Radio Star is still there, although they're still making as many videos as they used to, although MTV hasn't played any for over a decade. But it was sort of a futuristic, there was a big thing when we started MTV, what are we going to play first? And this, of course, just by the title alone, looked like what we'd pick. And as I said, it kicked off a long run of music videos. But it was an act that came out of, like a lot of the early MTV videos came out of Europe.
You started working at MTV before there even was an MTV, before MTV even had a name.
Right.
Can you take us back to how you got into that position and what that...
Yeah, I had been living in Afghanistan and Asia, of all things, and I had a business there that was very successful. I had no intention of getting into it, but for me it was like a base to travel. But it sort of crashed and burned. I came back to the States, and I was looking to do something I also loved, which was music. I was a music fanatic. So I found out about this idea that someone was going to start a video music channel, and I got an interview with the people, and they said, we're looking to hire people who have no experience in music. I said, well, I'm your guy. I've been living in Afghanistan. They don't even have television there. They don't even have anything there. So they didn't want anybody who had any experience in television, rather, I should say, because we can't afford to pay people the kind of money that they want to spend to do things. So they hired a lot of eccentric, oddball people, a lot of them out of the radio business, a lot of them out of the music business, a lot of them, in the case of Nickelodeon, which was our sister channel, school teachers. But there was this one thing in common we all had. No one had worked in television. So it was interesting.
At the time, there were a few cable channels, but cable was a relatively new
Yeah,
medium.
this was the beginning of really modern cable. Cable had existed primarily out in the Midwest or rural areas where people needed better reception. So we kind of started, we were the tip of the spear with CNN, started at the same time, ESPN, USA Network. We were sort of, Nickelodeon was another one. We were going to be the first real things that would bounce off a satellite and help people get cable in cities and suburban areas.
You guys were here in New York City, based out of New York City, starting this. There was no cable in New York City when MTV
There was
started?
cable in New York City. New York City was an anomaly. It had cable, but they wouldn't put us on. So it was called Manhattan Cable. Maybe it's still called that.
Yeah.
But they wouldn't put us on. Most cable operators wouldn't put us on because they didn't want to pay any money. They said, no one's going to watch music on television. Give me a break. And then there wasn't, so no one who worked at MTV got it.
Yeah.
We just made tapes and sent them out to some thing on Long Island where they bounced it off a satellite. So no one ever really saw it. I was really one of the only one or two people who got to see MTV in action in the Midwest and places where we were on the air and, a town could enjoy it. And it's hard to remember now, but MTV was kind of revolutionary back in 1981.
Yeah.
It had a whole new visual look and style, and there was no shows. It was a whole new type of format. So that's the story.
I mean, the idea of a music video was even kind of a novelty, at least here in the States, right?
They really hadn't had much exposure in the States. They did exist in Europe because in Europe there was no real commercial radio stations playing music. So the record companies needed some kind of promotional outlet. So they had a show like Top of the Pops in the UK. And if the band wasn't playing, they'd make these little music videos. Could be just Rod Stewart strumming a guitar in front of a fire. But that's where most of the music videos came from. In the States, no one had really, had any exposure to them.
So you had an instinct, you had a gut instinct that this thing was going to work. What did you envision MTV was going to be when you applied for that job?
I thought this was one of the greatest ideas of all time. I had spent a summer in Berlin, and I had a girlfriend, and she'd go to work, and I'd go to the record store, and the record stores had music videos, and I'd be transfixed. I'd be sitting in there, not buying any records, but watching music videos all day long. So when I heard there was going to be like a equivalent of a radio station playing videos on TV, I said, this is one of the greatest ideas ever. So I had a big belief in it. I had no idea that it would turn out to be as big as it did or be as global as it became.
What was your first job when you started?
There was 6 or 7 of us. I was the head of marketing.
Yeah. This is a good segue to our next song. Are you ready?
Yeah, I better get equipped here. Hit it. Sure. Dire Straits, Money for Nothing. This song was a marketer's dream.
Okay. Tell us the story, I guess, of where this song comes from. The idea of I Want My MTV was in the popular imagination because of a sort of campaign you guys
We ran
came
this ad campaign because we were trying to get cable up. We were about to go out of business. This was like a Hail Mary pass. And the cable operators, advertisers, no one really wanted anything to do with us. But the people who got it really liked it. So we said, if we could apply to those people and kind of force the cable operators to take us and say, call your cable company, say, I want my MTV, we could force distribution, which happened. We'd run advertising at really high levels, like for 3 or 4 weeks, and every cable operator, who were monopolists at the time, they'd surrender, put up the white flag, and we'd be on. And we kind of rolled across the country, picking up millions of subscribers. So that was out there. And we were getting somewhat popular. And then Mark Knopfler, he thought MTV's this vapid thing. Money for nothing, chicks for free. You don't have to do anything. So it was a takedown song. Yeah. So then they got Sting in to, do the lead into it. And it ran. And in those days, you could have a worldwide hit. So this song was a hit all over the world. So in future years, when we went out into new markets and they hadn't heard of MTV, they had heard of MTV because of this song. So the song kind of pre-sold us. It was a gift that kept giving.
You have this great story in the book about the campaign and getting stars to be a part of the campaign, right? Getting people like Mick Jagger and Bowie. At the time, MTV's not that big yet. So it's like asking these huge stars to do this ad is a big deal. What was that process like?
Well, we couldn't get any. The record companies didn't. Yeah. They treated us like we were some kind of fan club. Yeah. They wouldn't even give us pictures.
Yeah. And
we found out the only way we really could get something done was to kind of ask the artists themselves. jump over the wall, just ask the artist. So I remember going to David Bowie. He was the first artist who let us use photos, use a photo of him. And all he wanted to know was, what is this MTV? I said, it's about me. It's good for music. It's going to put music in people's homes 24 hours a day. He goes, all right. So, we went on from there. But we found out early on that our trick would be, if we could, to deal directly with the artists as much as possible. And
you got to meet a lot of them doing this.
Met a lot of artists over the years, probably all of them. I was there 26 years. So, we saw them come, we saw them go, and hopefully the good ones just, they just stayed around, and we developed regular relationships with them.
I want to keep working our way through the years in different eras of MTV, but so far we're still in the very sort of early nascent stages.
Yeah, 81, 82, 83 now, yeah.
Okay, let's see what the next song on our playlist is.
Herbie Hancock, Rockit, kind of a scratch thing he was doing. Yeah. That won 5 Video Music Awards.
The very first year.
The first year, yeah. The first year it won 5 awards, and he's barely in it.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was a unusual track for us.
How did the Video Music Awards sort of come about?
Well, we figured at some point we got to take a bow. How do we get a little bigger? So let's see if we can go up against the Grammys and do something that's a little more irreverent, a little more fun, a little more wild. So let's break the bank. Let's rent out Radio City Music Hall. We'll get Dan Aykroyd and Bette Midler to be hosts, and we'll invite all the media, the press, people, fans, and jam it up and see if we can have a wild party. And it turned out to be a great move, because it really moved us up like a whole other level in the popular culture. And there was a lot of killer performances in that very first show. But it kind of legitimized us in a much bigger way.
And it's a different type of programming, I guess, for you guys at the time, right? It's just at this point you're just playing videos.
We just had videos,
people in the middle talking about them.
Yeah, and they talk about them. Maybe we hadn't even jacked up the music news segments yet. Yeah.
So this is a new idea, like let's put on this award show, and it becomes sort of a runaway hit.
It was part of a general thing, which was we had this creeping ambition. How could we do more? What could we do to break this format and make it a little more compelling and interesting, and challenge ourselves? That was a large part of it.
There's a show that you guys did. I believe it's one of the first non-music shows, called Remote Control.
Yeah. Ken Ober.
Yeah.
Adam Sandler got his Stevie start on that show, and Colin Quinn.
What was why do something besides music videos? Like, it seems like a risk at the time, or maybe it's not. Well,
we at some point, like in 86, 87, we decided, the bloom was not off the rose, but we could see that, playing videos back to back. Yeah. This new thing came along called the remote controls, like the size of a bar of soap, so we needed to have people stick around a little longer. And we thought maybe we could be a bigger place if we could take like 10% of all our time and be about the things that the music's about. Let's be about fashion. Let's be about movies. Let's be about, other forms of the popular culture. And a game show popped up, and these two guys did a for $5,000, they put together a run-through pilot in their basement of a send-up of a, game show.
Yeah.
We were then trying to burrow into the New York City comedy community, which was up and coming at the time. So it was Remote Control. We put it on the air, and it was a big hit, and that ran for a bunch of years.
And does that change? I guess it changes the calculus for you guys, too. It's like, wait a minute. This is the beginning of the shift where we don't only have to play music videos. We can come up with lots of new shows.
We tried to really modulate the shift. Yeah. We started things like at the same time we started MTV News. We hired Kurt Loder. We Chris Conley. We had called The Big Picture, which was a show about movies. We tried a couple of House of Style with Cindy Crawford. And we would try and keep it under 10% of the total airtime. So that's like 16 hours a week out of 168. And it really made the channel more interesting. It brought in more different types of fans who did stick around and enjoy the music. And it made us a bigger business that was less reliant on just the vitality of the music of the day.
Yeah. I guess if you're like in your car listening to the radio, and a song comes on that you don't love, you're going to change the station. And
Yeah,
the same thing's
you just had
happening.
to push the button.
Same thing's happening with MTV. If you get a music video, you're like, I don't care about this. I'll flip the channel,
Yeah.
and you lose them. Whereas if you have someone for a half hour for a show, they're much
They'll
more
stick around a little
engaged.
longer.
Yeah.
And we also started doing live events like spring break and things like that. And it was also that the creative, really try to say we were a creative company at heart,
Yeah.
and the creative cadre within the company always wanted to do more.
Yeah.
So we're not going to play videos, but we could figure out other ways to do music shows and things that weren't just running videos and keep the channel a little more interesting. Put some punctuation marks on the schedule.
Yeah. Now it's shifting away from an interview, and I'm just asking you for advice for what we should do. What we should do here. But the key is hire really smart people who are creative and give them.
Yeah, well, I mean, I always thought if we had truly a creative culture there, that would be a big competitive advantage. You know, we had young people, we're dealing with music, and I wanted to have we had really young employees. Yeah. We had the worst dressed group of people working in any Manhattan office building.
Yeah.
You know, we try to have this downtown sensibility, but we were stuck up on 6th Avenue. But it was fun. It was cool. People love coming to work. And if we could keep the vibe good and allow people some license and let them take some risks, we could keep trying new things and try and move ourselves up the ladder.
I have another song that I think might be, for me, probably one of the most famous music videos.
Thriller. John Landis. Yeah. That was something that set us up yet another level. Yeah. Because what that said was like, hey, big time directors are going to come in. Yeah. Record companies are now going to start spending money making music videos. And this Michael Jackson, he's just amazing. Yeah. And it was so powerful, and it ran like 13 minutes, that I remember taking out ads in magazines, like People magazine, that would say what times we were going to air it, and our ratings went through the roof. So all of a sudden we broke out of what had been this rather, I wouldn't say narrow, but the size of our audience really broadened. He brought in a lot of other people to the channel who then liked it and stuck around. So we kind of moved into a new level.
I remember even as a kid in the 90s watching MTV and seeing countdowns. We're going to play Thriller again like today, or maybe it was around Halloween or different times of the year there would be these Thriller specials. It was that popular years and years later.
It was like if you ever watched the Discovery Channel, they had the sharks.
Yeah.
Michael Jackson was the shark of MTV. You just say his name, and people would flock to the network and turn it on to watch him. You know,
what was it about Michael? And did you get the chance to meet him or spend any time with him? He invested his personal resources into making this video. He saw it, like he saw the future. It seems like
he was made for video too. I mean, he had the moves, and he had the money, and he had the right music. It was a perfect combination. He had a whole string of hits. And what was it was he was a superstar. He was at that point he was probably the biggest star around. So to have him legitimize us and legitimize the form of music video, that brought a lot of other people to the table. Because when we started MTV, it was really kind of like what you would call today alternative bands out of the UK, things like Duran Duran or Culture Club. But all of a sudden now, Bruce Springsteen, Bob Seger, major artists, ZZ Top, they're all looking at, maybe we should do a music video too.
How did you guys find, going back to the very early days, how did you actually find and source all this content, find these videos? You told me there were some in Europe that were being made, but...
Yeah. I mean, there was, when we started, there was probably 40 record companies. Now there's 2.5. Yeah. Just think about that. But there was 40, and we had arms out to all of them. And after a while, they start coming to us. you know, because they're looking to, particularly a lot of them based in the UK or in Europe, they want to promote their acts. They found out there's a video music channel in the United States that's getting some renown and distribution. So people started knocking on our doors. After a while, we didn't have to do a lot of selling.
Yeah.
Things would just arrive. We used to maybe get 2, 3, 4 videos a week. You know, a couple of years later, we're getting 50 or 60 a week. You know, we couldn't even play them all.
Yeah. What was the turning point for you in the history of MTV where guys were struggling and trying to make this thing work to, no, this is huge. This is a cultural sort of revolution.
Live Aid.
Yeah.
Live Aid. Bob Geldof came to us with this idea for Live Aid. It's going to be a 15-hour show. They're going to do it at Wembley and in Philadelphia. And ABC said, you know, we'll do a 3-hour kind of, you know, highlight show that night. We said, you know, hey, we'll run the whole thing. Yeah. We got nothing else to do. So we put, you know, news desks and VJs in both places, and we covered it all like it was a Super Bowl kind of thing, which it was. And that got us like the biggest audience of all time. I mean, and helped sell us all around the world too. So Live Aid really was I would say the last step in the legitimization of MTV.
Were you in Philadelphia? Were you
I was in Philly, yeah.
Must have been just a crazy, and also sort of stressful.
I had to go down there,
pieces.
and I remember going down there, and the guy who had all our passes and everything, because we were right on the stage, he disappeared. So how are we going to get in? So me and this other guy, we snuck around. We found the artist's enclosure, and we jumped the fence. I landed in front of like Bob Dylan's trailer and said like Tom Petty and the Beach Boys. And it was all down the line. It was like the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame trailer park. And worked our way to the stage, and I was there for the whole thing. Yeah, it was fantastic. I remember Phil Collins coming in because he took the Concorde. He played London, and then he played New York too, or played Philly.
Was there a lot of resistance from certain artists? It sounds like a lot of the UK new wave acts were already ahead of the trend. They get that this is going to be a big deal. I guess Bruce Springsteen maybe is an example of someone who is a little bit more resistant to the form of music video.
Yeah, I don't know if they were resistant or they just weren't paying attention. They figured maybe they didn't need to do it. Maybe it was beneath them. You know, I don't know what their individual reasons were, but eventually, you know, cash register was calling them. Yeah. I mean, this was a way to sell records. These are 3-minute advertisements for your record, help you image yourself, and yeah. I mean, so a lot of the so-called legacy acts then got in on the party.
I think there's a story that I think I heard from you of Talking Heads had music videos, and they were selling like records in Tulsa, Oklahoma at the record store like crazy. And people are saying, I want to buy that because I saw music video.
Yeah. That was one of the things we had to prove to the record companies early on was that, you know, people see a music video, they're going to want to buy the record.
Yeah.
They didn't really believe that. That's why they wouldn't really provide us with the music videos, but the more independent labels would. So Talking Heads, Duran Duran, they would come in. We went around. I went to Tulsa. That was the first big city that had it. And we go to the record stores. They go, oh yeah, you know, people come in and ask for Duran Duran. They ask for Talking Heads. We never even, you know, we don't even carry their records. But they said they saw it on MTV. They want to buy it. Next thing you know, I'm buying a whole crate of them. They're selling out. People are going into barbershops asking for haircuts, like after these guys.
Flock of seagulls.
Flock of seagulls. Best haircuts of all time.
Interesting haircuts.
Yeah. You don't see a lot of them around these days.
I think it shows before there was MTV and before the music video revolution, the image of an artist wasn't as important. Live shows important. You buy the record. Whatever the artwork is probably important. But how they look isn't necessarily as important. And then when MTV comes around, you got guys like Devo that are putting on this whole outfit and way of presenting themselves in addition to the music.
Yeah, I mean, before you had like an album cover.
Yeah.
That was about it.
Yeah.
And then you had television. And, you know, television, a really potent device. You know, it's one more thing you can do wrong. And artists would do things, you know, it wasn't like you're going to make a video and it's going to be automatically beneficial for you, so you had to be kind of smart about it. But yeah, television, you know, like podcasts now make a difference.
Okay, I got another one for you, and I think this was like a turning point.
Public Enemy,
Yeah.
Right to Power.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a big one. I think that was originally going to be in Spike Lee's big movie. And, it was a politically loaded song by a political group. It was in the early days of, it wasn't the earliest days of hip-hop. It was the early days of the popularization of hip-hop, 89, 88, 89.
89 is when that came out, I believe.
Yeah. So it had a big impact, and that opened a big door for us, the sort of the hip-hop revolution, if you would. That was a whole new incarnation of MTV, in a sense. A whole new cast of characters came in with a whole new video style that started. It was, again, like it was a new scene. Like subsequently, we'd see that scene from Seattle. I mean, the music scene having these various new movements pop up. But we were one of the first promulgators to put hip-hop in the living rooms of Middle America. There's no doubt about that.
Yo MTV Raps, right? That was another sort of feels like a turning point moment.
Yeah, it definitely was a big turning point. We had Fab Five Freddy, who was sort of your Renaissance man as the MC. We had him on once a week, and then we had a daily show. And they were like the highest rated music hours we'd ever seen in the history of the network. I mean, people ate this up.
Yo, MTV Raps, Q-Tip from A Tribe Called...
What's up, y'all? Word Booty, A Tribe Called Quest. Word Booty.
Yeah, and at one point we had... I guess it was Run DMC and Aerosmith did that sort of crossover walk this way that sort of sanctified the rock and roll and hip hop connection. And then it was all smooth sailing from there.
It's interesting to just think of this show like it's a time where hip hop wasn't prominent on TV. And it is a little bit of a risk to start MTV Raps, or maybe it felt like that internally. And then it becomes this huge hit like right away, right? The very first episode that went up.
Yeah, I mean,
It
became one of the highest rated music hours in our history. I mean, hip hop had been, hitting, it was on sort of a street level in Manhattan and Brooklyn. It was around throughout the early 80s, late 70s, early 80s, but, nobody was playing it. BET wasn't even playing it. And finally, we put this show on and gave it a real booster shot, if you will, into the American consciousness.
I got another song for you.
Okay. Eric Clapton, Tears in Heaven. That was from Unplugged.
Yeah.
He had an album called Unplugged, which was the biggest selling album of his career.
Yeah.
I'll never forget going to see the taping of that outside. It was outside Heathrow Airport in London one night. And he... we had this Unplugged franchise. We had a few, McCartney had done one, but Eric Clapton tuned in, did this. This became a big hit.
Would it be the same if I saw you in heaven?
But the whole idea was, in the wake of all this loud hair bands and hard, heavy metal, what if we just had people play acoustically and just take away the electricity and see how it sounds, be more authentic, be different? And audience really responded to that. And that was, we sold, and so many artists would come to us and they put out records, subsequently of the performances. And, we had all the major artists, Bob Dylan to LL Cool J did Unplugged. That was another big thing that we came up with that seemed, in retrospect, really simple. Yeah. Why didn't anyone think of that before?
Yeah. It really was like ahead of its time. There wasn't anything like that. And now there's a lot of sort of programs that have followed in that
The backstory on that was we wanted Bon Jovi to do like the Video Music Awards one year. And then John Bon Jovi said, well, I don't think the whole band can show up, but Richie and I will do a couple numbers acoustically. So we had like the stage that went out into the audience. They just sat out there and played a couple songs, and it got a big audience response. We had this guy John Small. Let's do a whole show around this. Make it a series. I mean, there's endless amount of them out there now.
I was watching one this morning that I think was the first, and I think it was 1989. Squeeze.
Yeah.
Pulling Muscles from a Shell.
Right.
They started.
Yeah. Yeah, they were good.
It was got a great band, and just the whole look of it is it's different. It's a throwback, but it's like it feels intimate. You feel close to these people.
So we always felt if we could keep coming up with new ideas and new franchises like that made sense, that people liked, we could keep on sailing, and the business would continue.
What about the Real World?
The Real World was, at the time, Fox had started a new network, and it was going to skew to young people. And they were doing soap operas, Beverly Hills 90210. So someone said, man, we could, young people like to look at themselves on television. We knew that. What if we did a soap opera? And they came up with a treatment. And I remember saying, that we can't afford it. We need to hire writers. We don't have any money. We don't have any money to hire writers. But they went back and said, well, what if we just hired a bunch of people and put them in a loft down on Broadway on Prince Street? And just let them go about their lives, and then we'll post. We were very good at post-production, and we could post it into episodes. That was the birth of the Real World.
That wasn't just the birth of the Real World. That was the birth of reality TV, really.
Yes, for better or for worse. For better or for worse.
It's hard to imagine a time when there wasn't reality TV.
It was interesting because the people that we cast, they had no idea that reality TV was coming, so increasingly people for subsequent seasons, they put on these acts like hire me because I've got some angle. Yeah. And these were just people honestly coming in, and it was, kind of non-eventful, but it made compelling. Young people always like to see what people their age are doing, and watching a show like that on television made a lot of sense. And since it was low cost, it was a format that the networks started to adopt as they were getting squeezed for money. But we did like the first sort of what they call celebrity reality shows. We did the Osbournes, and that was a big hit too.
Crazy. Hey, but that's how it goes.
Did that take some convincing to get Ozzy and family to do that?
Brian Graydon, who was the head of programming, was riding in an SUV with Sharon Osbourne, and they had done something. And Sharon says, "Oh man, you and me, my life is so fucking crazy. The things we do every day." And he goes, "Well, why don't we just hire a camera crew and follow you around?" And she goes, "Sure." That was the pitch, and that was the sale. We were off.
Great show.
Yeah,
really good. Okay, so I want to go a little bit further in time to the 90s.
Britney Spears. One more baby, one more time. Yeah, she's longing for her old boyfriend to come back. This is her first single, her first video. This kind of opened up the door. She arrived with a big boom.
So I associate that song with TRL.
Right.
What was TRL?
Total Request Live, which we would do from the second floor of 1515 Broadway, and it was a call-in request show. Yeah. And people would come and play, and every day they'd do like the top 10 videos. And gradually it got, because of pop music was sort of, the Backstreet Boys, not NXS. NSYNC. There was a whole family of these bands that became very popular, particularly with people who'd watch in the afternoon and had time to call in for, it was almost like a teenage show.
Yeah. I remember it probably came on at like 4 o'clock or something like that, 4 or 5. So it was, you'd leave school. I would leave school and I would go home and I would turn on MTV and I would watch this show.
Did you ever call in?
I never called in. I don't know if I wasn't allowed to or I didn't think to, but I never called the radio. I never called an infomercial on TV, but I knew that people did. And I was fascinated with the countdown and understanding what was popular at the time.
Yeah, and the record companies, they would have all these phone banks. Yeah. We used to have a thing before called Dial MTV. They get these things called demon dialers. Yeah. They just dial the same number and vote for a certain record. They kind of jack the system that way.
So Britney Spears, the boy bands, and then at the same time, Eminem. Yeah. Feels like he's sort of peaking in the same moment, and they're like next to each other. They're seemingly different artists, but they're like next to each other in this TRL universe. Yeah,
and the same age, and both went after the same demographic, although the boy bands would kind of be more female and a little bit younger. And Eminem, he was sort of the second wave of hip hop that came our way. He was big on MTV.
Yeah. He has a song, one of his most famous songs, where he's talking about Carson Daly and being at the Video Music Awards and sitting next to Britney Spears, and he has this whole rap about that.
Sit me here next to Britney Spears. Christina Aguilera better switch me chairs so I can sit next to Carson Daly and Fred Durst and hear them argue over who she gave to first. Little put me on blast on MTV. Yeah, he's cute, but I think he's married to Kim.
That, from an outside perspective, seems to be the peak of MTV's cultural dominance, at least where I was sitting. Was that true from a business standpoint too?
I mean, that was sort of the height of the monoculture, if you will. It's like the internet had started, but video hadn't really, video on the internet hadn't really gotten traction. There wasn't really the bandwidth to do it. It wasn't until like 04, 05, 06 that we really began to see a lot of our viewers migrating to the internet to watch things like Launch TV. And, we began to lose our mojo about then. And the fact was, we thought, this is fantastic. We can just take a library of 16, 20,000 videos and just put them all online and start streaming them, and we could have a big online business. But the record companies, they didn't want to license MTV or VH1 the rights to air videos on digital. They thought we had built a business on their back, and we were worth more on Wall Street, say, than any of the record companies were. And they didn't want MTV to dominate the internet. So we were kind of frozen out in a way. We tried to skirt it here and there, but it was difficult.
It's an really interesting period in music history, because at the same time, they're dealing with the fall of CDs and the rise of Napster, and they're kind of getting...
Their heads were spinning. Their heads were really spinning, and all these digital outfits came out to try and do things. Napster kind of spawned all these other things that were involved in file sharing, and the record companies, the business affairs, the legal side just said no to everybody. And then they convinced Steve Jobs to put iTunes together and, market the iPod and everything. And this was a way you could now buy individual songs, which really hadn't been possible. But that sort of deconstructed the whole idea of buying an album, which led to a whole host of other problems.
We just heard Tom say that Total Request Live was the height of the monoculture, which is quite a large claim. But to dissect it, we're going to go to the studio for a short essay. On September 14th, 1998, MTV premiered Total Request Live, a music countdown show originally hosted by Carson Daly. The format was straightforward, and it was kind of brilliant. TRL played the 10 most requested music videos as voted on by viewers via phone or online. Every weekday afternoon, massive numbers of teenagers watched the same top 10 music videos in the same order and argued about the rankings the next day at school. Pop music became a competitive sport. TRL landed at a perfect moment in American media history. It arrived after MTV had already turned music into a visual form, and before broadband, internet, and YouTube turned video into a free-for-all. It gave teenagers a sense of ownership over what was in, and what feels especially interesting now is that it also introduced a cultural logic that's totally familiar today. TRL worked like a proto-feed. It was a visible algorithm. Engagement produced rankings. Rankings produced discourse, and that discourse produced even more engagement. That kind of loop powers basically every platform today. But where it differed from today's social media feeds is that everyone saw the same results. Everyone experienced the same culture at the same time. That shared experience is what people mean when they talk about monoculture. We just heard Tom Freston say that TRL was the height of the monoculture. So let's step back for a second and talk about what monoculture actually is and how it functioned in American society. In the late 1990s, pop culture still ran through choke points. To break through music nationally, you needed to win over gatekeepers. You needed a label to distribute your record, you needed radio programmers to put you in rotation, and by the time TRL premiered, you also needed MTV and a handful of TV outlets to make you visible. Distribution was narrow, and that narrowness created monoculture. Of course, subcultures and niche genres have always existed, but the biggest stars were unavoidable. Your Elvises, your Beatles, your Michael Jacksons, your Madonnas, they were everywhere whether you wanted to hear them or not. And in the TRL era, that meant artists like Britney Spears, Eminem, Backstreet Boys, and Christina Aguilera. Those were the names getting debated at lunch tables like sports teams. TRL was perhaps the apex of monoculture because it ranked the entire country's youth culture on one shared daily scoreboard. But by the mid-2000s, that scoreboard started to collapse as video moved online. MTV thought the transition would be easy. They had the brand, the audience, and as Tom pointed out, a library of 16 to 20,000 videos ready to stream. But the economics changed. On cable, labels were happy to provide videos to MTV because MTV functioned like the biggest ad buy in music. Free promotion, which meant a wider reach and more record sales. Online, the equation was different. The videos themselves became a monetizable asset, which meant distribution suddenly mattered even more. Whoever owned the pipeline owned the leverage. Giving MTV digital rights would have recreated the same dependency as the cable era, just on a bigger scale. So labels refused to license MTV the digital rights to stream those videos, effectively freezing MTV out of the online music video era. But the audience migrated anyway. YouTube filled the vacuum, and Vivo followed as the label's attempt to regain control through official publishing. Ironically, the same systems that made TRL work ultimately destroyed the monoculture. TRL turned pop culture into a rank feed powered by engagement. The difference is that it was one shared feed. Everyone saw the same top 10. Now that exact mechanism runs the internet, but it's personalized. TikTok builds a different timeline for every person. Instagram does it, X does it, YouTube does it. This means some artists can be absolute superstars in certain communities while virtually invisible in others. There are a lot of examples of this, but maybe the most stark is NBA YoungBoy. A decent percentage of you listening to this right now have probably never heard of him, and an even bigger percentage couldn't name a song. Yet, he just broke the record for most RIAA certified songs of any rapper ever. More gold and platinum certifications than any rapper based on sales and streaming equivalents. More than Drake, more than Kanye, more than Eminem. He's one of the most viewed artists in YouTube history with around 15 billion views on his YouTube channel. The split would have been close to impossible in the TRL era. Back then, if you were that big, you were unavoidable. Now, culture moves through dozens of separate rooms at once. And here's how fragmented it's gotten. Starting January 16th, 2026, YouTube data stops counting towards Billboard's US charts, meaning the biggest video platform in the world isn't even part of the official scoreboard anymore. If monoculture worked the way it used to, kids would be at lunch arguing about whether YoungBoy or Yeet or Pink Pantheress had the best videos, the same way it used to be Britney versus Christina or NSYNC versus Backstreet. But today, to be a superstar, even to sell out stadiums, you don't need to be the biggest artist in America anymore. You just need to be the biggest artist in someone's algorithm. So over your career, you started with MTV, but you kind of started to branch out and work on a few different networks with Viacom.
Well, we had.
How did that work?
We had VH1, Nickelodeon, Nick at Night, TV Land, which was a classic TV, 24/7. Comedy Central, which was a favorite of mine. We started that. Well, we didn't start it. We started. We had a little war with HBO, which ended up in a joint venture called Comedy Central, and then we bought HBO out and we owned it entirely.
When did you start? When did you, I guess, start working on these other things and not just MTV, or was that?
Well, I worked on all of them all along because I was a CEO of MTV Networks. So Nickelodeon was actually predated MTV, and we got that and souped it up and changed it and tried to make it more contemporary, tried to make it cooler than Disney. We started Nicktoons, which would be a whole different kind of animation than you'd see coming out of a place like Hanna-Barbera. And then VH1 we launched early on, I think like 83, 84, because Ted Turner, who had launched CNN, he said that MTV's playing like the devil's music. You cable operators who all were like Elvis Presley fans.
Yeah.
You want, I got a thing called Cable Music Channel, and we ain't going to be throwing anybody's parent out a window. They always talk about that Twisted Sister video with Dee Snider. They throw the father out the window. We're going to be a God-respecting music network, and that's when we started VH1. It's be a sort of a flanker brand to MTV. And we said, if you have MTV, you get the second service, which is skewing for older viewers. You know, you get that for free. So effectively, Ted only lasted like 100 days, and we buried it.
Okay, how about this? This is one that's not MTV related, but I think a part of your...
Oh, this is a South Park theme song. Yeah. They just finished their 28th season. They've been on the air 28 years. Matt and Trey, they're
the
genius.
cover of this is, it says Chef Aid, like a send up to Live Aid, I guess, with Chef. So that's another show you got to work on that's had a huge impact on our culture.
Well, I mean, Comedy Central had a huge cultural impact, and lasting. If you consider The Daily Show, if you consider all the comedians who got their television start on Comedy Central, because we had a good eye and ear for young talent. Start with Bill Maher, Jimmy Kimmel, Jon Stewart, John Oliver, Samantha Bee, Steve Carell, Stephen Colbert, Matt and Trey with South Park, Dave Chappelle. They all started on Comedy Central. So we had like a powerhouse comedic lineup there.
Yeah.
That today is sort of the primary line of resistance to, you could say, to the Trump administration. Yeah. So
it's interesting, even going back to remote control, how you guys sort of had your finger on the pulse of the people working these New York comedy clubs. That's a talent resource. And that same thing, I think, is happening today, even with like TikTok and people who are big on social media. There's a lot of comedians. There's just this like talent pool that was untapped, or maybe wasn't spending as much time on television, that you guys tapped into and realized that.
I mean, one of the advantages we had a really young staff.
Yeah.
So they would mingle and be part of everything going on. If there was a scene going on or something going on, we were sort of in on it. We were downtown in the early 80s in the comedy clubs, and we had a great ability to find young talent.
Yeah.
And kind of cultivate them. I mean, when we got into animation, like with Mike Judge, people like that, Beavis and Butthead, we found people who had these characters in their heads, and they didn't know anything about animation. They were really kind of outliers to the animation factory business, like Hanna-Barbera. And we finally set up a studio, and we said, you will do all the muscle work. You just stay where you are. You come up with SpongeBob, and we'll kind of put you in business and do it. And you can fulfill your own creative fantasies. It doesn't have to go through a writer's room or anything. Yeah. So that was a whole new, and animation at that point in time, there was, we were seeing a whole movement that was taking place. There were graphic comics and all that kind of stuff, graphic novels. So that was a whole other bubbling under.
Do you feel like you personally have an eye for talent? How did you identify all these talented people?
mean,
what's the secret to doing that?
The real secret is surround yourself with people who are really good at it. Yeah. I mean, I would see stuff that other people, occasionally I'd find something, but I've been wrong as much as other people. But, people who are out in the street, they're out because this kind of stuff bubbles up from the bottom generally. You want to be out there finding them early. So we had great people, Doug Herzog, Judy McGrath, John Sykes. There was a great group of people who I worked with all these years who in turn would hire other people who were, I wouldn't call them talent spotters, but, and people would ultimately bang on our door because we had a reputation for being friendly and open to young creative talent. So that was the key to keeping the machine running.
I feel like we've covered a lot of the MTV history. I'm curious if there's any moments that you had where they were real pinch me moments with a musician or seeing something or an artist that was on MTV that you really loved personally.
God, there's so many. I mean, one moment I remember involved a politician. We at one point we decided, well, we get into politics, and we kind of got behind. We got into the 1992 presidential election, Clinton and Gore versus George H.W. Bush the first. And we did town halls. We followed the campaigns. We thought it would be good for, politicians historically would only really talk to older people about Social Security and things. What about student loans? What about, driver license ID so you can vote? Reasons, issues that were important to them. And Clinton won, and we decided we should have an inaugural ball. So we're good at throwing parties. At this point, we were very good at throwing parties. And I always thought there was one inaugural ball, but there was like 8 inaugural balls in Washington. But we had the MTV inaugural ball. It was the cool one. We had Jack Nicholson, Warren Beatty came. We had half of U2 and half of REM and Don Henley. It was really like the hottest party in Washington. And at one point, Clinton came. He's newly elected. It's Inauguration Day. He stood up on stage and right to the cameras, he said, MTV had a huge impact on getting us elected.
I think everybody here knows that MTV had a lot to do with the Clinton-Gore victory.
And I was like, I remember how we would sit around in a room eating pizza, just 6 or 7 of us with this idea, and it had sort of led to this. It was sort of a moment of temporary triumph.
Yeah. It's like, wow, we really are transforming American culture. Okay. I think we've covered it. I want to go back to before. You had this amazing career overseas where you lived in Afghanistan and in India, and you decided to import clothes that came from this love and obsession with travel. So you must have like a pretty good understanding. You must have heard some really interesting world music and songs from around the world. All right, are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Throw those on.
That's Nusrat Ali Fateh Khan doing a song called Mustt, which is a really, it was sort of a breakthrough. They have this thing called Qawwali music. It's a form of devotional music among Sufis. Very exotic sounding, very methodical. And this, they kind of fused them up in a mashup with a rock band. So it was, it was a very, this thing, it moves along, gets into a deep groove. But Qawwali music in general is like this hypnotic kind of sound. And you don't have to know what they're saying, but it's done with a harmonium. And they usually have these. Nusrat Ali Fateh Khan, he was like, I don't know, 350 pounds, big voice, big booming voice. And these guys are revered as like rock stars in South Asia.
How'd you discover them?
Well, I lived in India for 8 years. And it's all in the book. I mean, I found my way to India and Afghanistan. I just fell in love with the place. I love anything exotic. It takes me away from anything kind of normal. And I had a house there, and because I'm a music fan, I got into local music, and I found a lot of the local music in Asia and later in Africa really compelling and interesting, and really kind of drilled in as much as I could. And that kind of Qawwali music is fascinating because it's really like trance-inducing. Mustt means it's a form of spiritual intoxication. And that's sort of like you see these people, and when you see one of these shows, it's real participatory. Everybody gets up and they just run up and throw money all over the stage. They throw money all over the stage, and there's always this guy who's got like a broom, and he's sweeping away all the rupees or whatever. I'm thinking, that's a job. And then someone come up with they'll take 100 bills at once and just throw it in the air, and it showers down on the musicians. And sometimes in Africa, you see versions of that where people throw up their watches, their cell phones, they take their shirt off. Everything's for the performers. It's fascinating.
The idea of moving to Afghanistan for someone who's my age is kind of scary in the popular imagination, because of how the time we were raised.
It definitely has a bad reputation.
Yeah, it has a bad reputation, but it's not necessarily true.
No, in fact, when I showed up there, which was 1972, they were on the tail end of what had been 50, 60 years of peace. And they're very hospitable. Their tourist poster used to say, visit Afghanistan, see the world's friendliest people. And if you were there, you would have believed it. You never felt in danger, but you were really in a world that was removed and unplugged from the modern world. No cars, no advertising, driving around on horse and buggies, and people were really friendly. They were looking at joining the modern world. I mean, they were excited about the future that awaited them, but it unfortunately, starting in 1978, there was a revolution and a communist invasion, and then just a series of civil wars, Taliban, one thing after another, and it's been pretty nasty. But back in the early 70s, mid-70s, it was a fantastic place to be. You could lose yourself there, which I did.
I sort of sense a pattern and a connection between this and MTV with you, is that you sort of like to be at the forefront of something or at the cutting edge, or you see like maybe there's a moment of change and something new is coming. Can I be a part of that?
Yeah, there's that. And then I also, I discovered early on that life would be a lot more interesting if I wasn't in the mainstream. If I was off on the side of the road, things could be a little more interesting. Maybe I could step off the conveyor belt for a career and just kind of improvise my life, see what turned up, and try and do things that were a little more fringy. And all my years in Asia, I lived there for 8 years, and I had a successful business, but came to a series of unfortunate events, put it out of business. The things that I learned there about humility and work ethic and risk taking and authenticity really served me well to run like an eccentric media organization. It was a cutting edge thing like MTV Networks. So it all sort of worked out for me in a way.
I want to play another
right.
world song for you here.
That's Asha Bhosle, Dum Maro Dum. That was the soundtrack of one of the biggest movies in Indian history. India used to make 2 to 3 times more movies than we made in the States. This was a movie about an nice Indian Hindu girl who ran off with the hippies to Kashmir to smoke hashish. Dum Maro Dum means one more toke. But this song was, I would go through the bazaars, I'd wander through, and you'd always hear this Hindi pop music, and it always have these female vocals that were like, I used to think I was dreaming. I was in some kind of dreamlike state. It sounds so foreign and interesting, and that had a good beat to it. That was a big hit.
You got to expand MTV to all these other places around the world, right? And you got to do MTV India and
MTV India was one of our best ones.
Yeah.
I mean, I went back there in 93, 93, 94, we launched it. And we had all these young creatives from India, and we had little offices in Bombay and in Delhi. And it was kind of like starting MTV all over again, but they had a whole different take on it. Like, if we would mix in Bollywood music with stuff from Africa, with stuff with Hindi pop, and they actually had Punjabi hip-hop. I mean, this whole mix of stuff. And there's all these interesting characters and interesting situations in India they were able to draw. And that was, I think we had like 60 or 70 different MTV feeds in over 100 countries. But MTV India was the most vibrant and fun. And for me, it was a big deal to go back there after, 20, 30 years, wherever it was, and start a new business.
Where's the last place you went? You still travel like all the time?
I'm leaving in a week to go back to India.
There we go.
I'm going to the Jaipur Literary Festival, which is in Rajasthan. It's the biggest literary festival in the world. I got a book this time. I've been 5 times. It's so fun. They have music every night out in the canyons around Jaipur with these Qawwali bands and other things. But I'm selling my book, which has a lot of chapters, as your viewers will see when they buy it, about life in India in the tumultuous 70s.
Yeah. It's an incredible book. I read it in the last couple of days. I got it as a Christmas present. And what I appreciated is, like, at least the first half, probably more, you don't even talk about MTV. It's all about your travels around the world and adventures and things that you met and the people that you met along the way and things you got to experience. And I think it shows you have this real appreciation for people and for humanity and for sort of learning and exploring that really resonated with me. And I think the story is just incredible. So,
well, I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Yeah.
I've enjoyed my time here with you.
I've enjoyed
I like what you guys are doing.
Thank you very much.
Filling a void.
Appreciate it. Thanks for coming. Great to talk to you.
Jack.
Great playlist too.
Yeah, all right.
This is one I think people are going to like these songs.
Good.
We were playing Indian music from the 70s. We're playing Britney Spears. We're playing Dire Straits. We're kind of covering a lot of bases here.
That's right. That's a lot of territory over a lot of years. Cool. Jack, pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Thank you for coming.
Okay.
Great to meet you. That's a wrap.
The Trackstar Podcast is a presentation of Public Opinion created by me, Jack Coyne, Kieran Coyne, and Henry Cornaros. Written and produced by Noah John. Edited and produced by Haley Sobel. Theme and original composition by Kieran Coyne. Mixing by Devin Klein. Our agent is Joanna Orland at UTA. Thanks for listening. See you next Wednesday.